Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today. I am your presenter, Dr. Crystal Gossard. I am a doctor of clinical nutrition, a certified nutrition specialist, and a licensed nutritionist. I am the manager of education with Life Extension. I have been with the company almost 18 years. April will be 18 years, and I'm excited to share our 2025 nutritional news with you. And we thank you for your attendance. On this talk, we will be reviewing the heart health benefits of aged black garlic, what we're starting to learn about the health benefits of garlic, not just raw garlic, but that garlic that has been aged. Discussing histamine intolerance, how to manage histamine for digestive comfort, and how you can recognize histamine intolerance, the signs, the symptoms, as well as what you can do about it. And then, of course, our last kind of big area of research for Life Extension continues to be support through the transition period of perimenopause and menopause. And so we'll be looking at a new plant-based solution for hormonal support that's working in a little bit of a different mechanism than some of the plant-based support that's currently available. So let's start with our first topic of black garlic. What makes it different? What is aged garlic? And how the active constituent specifically supports heart health through supporting healthy lipids, cholesterol, LDL, so forth and so on, as well as inflammation. And so we first like to kind of look at what is the problem that we're dealing with, and really heart disease. If this is supporting, helping with heart health, we know that it continues to be the leading cause of death in the United States. And you look at risk factors that are often identified that translate to an elevated risk of heart disease. And that could be everything from smoking, of course, elevated lipids, high blood pressure, and a number of other genetics, of course, is a risk factor as well. But Life Extension has identified almost 19 risk factors for heart disease. And so we understand that many people are dealing with this. They are struggling to manage their elevated markers. And this is just looking at kind of your typical lipid profile that you may get from your doctor once a year, maybe twice a year, if you're on prescription medication to manage these markers. But elevated cholesterol, and specifically LDL, we also recognize the value in looking at the particle size, looking at the small dense LDL and some others, but we're kind of focusing here on those classic markers that most primary care physicians or cardiologists, what they are tracking and monitoring over time. HDL, which we consider that the good cholesterol. We want that cholesterol to be a little on the higher side, the LDL cholesterol on the lower side, triglycerides, of course, on the lower side, as well as elevated blood glucose. We also know that elevated glucose, diabetes in particular, pre-diabetes, these are all risk factors for heart disease. And so conventional recommendations are to improve these, the levels of your blood pressure, your LDL, your glucose, but they are often very stubborn, and we're often looking for more options. Let's make sure I didn't skip a slide, just a moment. Yes, okay. So in comes garlic. Now, garlic's health benefits have been recognized for thousands of years. Published studies show garlic supports immune health, of course, cardiovascular health, cellular detox, helping to manage oxidative stress, and so much more. And garlic is high in unique sulfur compounds. One example of this sulfur compound is allicin. Many of you are familiar with allicin and its support for immune health. That those sulfur compounds, or allicin in particular, these are responsible for its scent, garlic's taste, and beneficial effects, as well as its broad health benefits for heart health. But garlic is also known for its pungent odor and taste, and many preparations have been developed to utilize garlic to get all the health benefits of garlic and avoid the odor. And you can see some of the culinary preparations of garlic. This the slide with the garlic around the neck, or the image, that's not a culinary use, but it's been used to potentially help to support immune health by even wearing it around your neck. But that's not what we are referring to today. And there's a little bit of a delay, so please bear with me as I transition my slide. So we have raw garlic, and that's what we were referring to before, but now we're focusing in on aged garlic. Aging alters garlic substantially. The texture changes. Some of you may be familiar with cooking with black garlic now. I've seen it in certain specialty grocery stores. I've seen it at Whole Foods, for example, Fresh Market. It develops a chewy texture. It loses its pungent odor and flavor and becomes kind of sweet tasting. So that's your black garlic. And this is due in part by the reduction of allicin that we talked about earlier. And this is after exposure to high heat. And so the alanine or allicin, these sulfur compounds that you find in fresh garlic, are downregulated by inactivation and thermal degradation of the product, or the black garlic products. But that's a good thing. Now, we know allicin, of course, is beneficial, but during that aging process, another component is upregulated. And aging transforms allicin into different bioactive compounds, such as S-allylcysteine, or we like to call it SAC at Life Extension. But it's S-allylcysteine, also known as SAC, and you can see kind of the details around that aging process. And this is where Life Extension is excited when you start looking at the research with SAC. We have research where SAC, along with other peptides produced in garlic, can support healthy blood pressure levels. They help to prevent or limit the oxidation of LDL, which is an important factor. Life Extension sees it as kind of an independent risk factor for heart disease, or the development in plaque formation or atherosclerosis. That's when you have LDL that has become oxidized, because that LDL, when it's oxidized, it can't really get into the cell. It can't deliver its cholesterol, so it's staying in the arteries and can lead to the development of atherosclerosis. This SAC, we have research decreasing the synthesis and absorption of cholesterol and so many other benefits that you see on this graphic. Fasting glucose, triglycerides, inflammation, inhibiting NF-kappa B, which we see NF-kappa B is, we call it the master orchestrator of inflammation that causes a downstream production of pro-inflammatory mediators from cells. And so when we look at stubborn markers, we're excited to see another tool in the tool belt of a nutrient that is found particularly in black garlic. You are not finding SAC in high amounts in raw garlic. And here's a study showing, kind of looking at some of those benefits. This was a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial. The extract used in this study was developed by scientists via a patented process for producing aged black garlic. And the process that the scientists used to produce this had to produce an even higher concentration of SAC than other forms of aged black garlic. So this level, the standardization that was used in this product provided 2.5 milligrams of SAC, and that was per dose of a 500 milligram tablet of aged black garlic. So 56 healthy adults with borderline cardiovascular risk, duration of this study, 12 weeks. So about 3 months, which is a good amount of time to give something a try to see if it's helpful, if it works for you. And the primary outcomes measured were serum triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL, and HDL. What you'll see in your typical lipid profile. There were secondary outcomes measured, such as blood pressure and fasting glucose. And so looking at the results, and this is in comparison with levels measured at the beginning of the studies, triglycerides were reduced by an average of 19 points, total cholesterol by 24 points. And I'm giving you the points because sometimes percentages can be a little misleading, but even if you look at the percentages, just an outstanding decrease in these cardiovascular risk markers. In addition, there was a decrease in serum LDL, and this is from baseline, as well as an increase in serum HDL. So again, these stubborn lipids, we now have another way to address those lipids. There was also a decrease in systolic and diastolic blood pressure, 5.3%, as well as 6.5% decrease. These improvements represent a substantial shift toward improved cardiovascular health and reduced risk of vascular disorders, occlusive coronary artery disorders that so many maturing individuals confront. So that's just one study I wanted to review for the black garlic. We do have some frequently asked questions that some of you may be putting into the chat as we speak. One in particular is about raw garlic. where does raw garlic fit into this equation? We know that both have health benefits. We know that both nutrients, raw garlic and black garlic, sometimes called fermented garlic. I think I may have called it fermented garlic as well, but aged black garlic. One is giving you allicin, great for immune support, but we are seeing that the black garlic is more targeted for cardiovascular support. You could take both. There's no reason why you can't take both. We still know when you look at the preponderance of evidence, there are there's so much research. Just in general, the term garlic has over 8,000 references if you were to go to PubMed. So by far the most researched form of garlic. Fermented garlic or black garlic, significantly less studies, but the studies that we are seeing, the human data is really leading us to understand that there is a place for both. The black garlic or the aged garlic has less of the pungency, of course, because it doesn't have as much of the allicin. So for people who are trying to maybe avoid garlic breath, the black garlic is certainly an option for you. Now let's switch gears and move on to our next product or our next ingredient, which is DAO, digestive enzyme support for dietary histamine sensitivity. Now, our problem: gas, bloating, itchy, headache. These are all associated with histamine-rich food and foods and drinks. Food sensitivities or intolerances in general are estimated to affect about 20% of the population. A frequently undiagnosed example is histamine intolerance, and many people are dealing with these symptoms. You know, one I would like to call out is the headaches or the migraines, and they are unaware that it could be unsuspecting foods that are generally considered healthy. So first, let's talk about histamine. What is histamine? It is a compound produced in your body, mainly by your immune system. It's can act as a neurotransmitter in the body. It plays a role in various functions, such as the inflammatory response, congestion. It's associated with alertness. That's why the first generation antihistamines, if you take them to try to manage your allergies, you may get drowsy. Of course, it's involved with digestion and dilation of blood vessels. And so it's stored and released in various cells. You can see an example of a mast cell, one of your immune cells, and it's involved in the inflammatory response. But like most things, too much can lead to problems. So histamine in general is not bad, but too much can cause some unwanted side effects. So where does this histamine come from? Histidine, which is just one of your amino acids, can be converted into histamine. There are many foods that contain histamine that is delivering the histamine directly when you eat those foods, such as fermented foods are higher in histamine. Shellfish microbes can make histamine, and we'll look at a full list in a couple of slides later. Gut bacteria also have can produce enzymes that can make histamine in the GI tract. And then what happens to that histamine? Well, histamine can be broken down by an enzyme known as diamine oxidase, DAO, or DAO. So you can call it, if you're scientific, diamine oxidase, DAO or DAO. You may hear me refer to DAO later in the presentation. This particular enzyme that breaks down histamine is mainly located in the small intestines, and it helps us to, I like to just say, digest or metabolize histamine from that's produced or given to us from our food, that we receive from our food. So let's look at the problem here. We know where histamine is coming from. We know how it's broken down by the DAO enzyme. And so now let's get to this histamine intolerance. And this, all roads lead to a disruption in DAO, or that enzyme that breaks down histamine. And really, this generally occurs when the histamine degradation system, how histamine is degraded in the gut, cannot process histamine in foods. So why is that? Some people have just are genetically set up to have a reduced amount or activity of DAO. That's just something that, you know, we all have our issues that have just been passed down from generation to generation. So there are enzyme polymorphisms where that enzyme may not be quite as active. Of course, diet. We overwhelm DAO, meaning we are eating tons of histamine-rich foods. I remember I said fermented foods. So you think about everyone trying to be healthy and eat fermented foods to support gut health. And now maybe we are overdoing it and overwhelming this enzyme. And when I say overwhelm enzyme, meaning the enzyme's there. Maybe you do have a genetic predisposition where your enzyme's there, but maybe it's not as active, but maybe you don't. And you're just overwhelming it, meaning you're just putting that enzyme to work, and there's just not enough to digest all the histamine coming from your foods. There are also food that stimulates histamine release and foods that block the activity of that enzyme. Of course, the microbiome, makeup, and intestinal inflammation. There can be intestinal dysbiosis, overgrowth of inflammatory or histamine producing bacteria. And then some medications, one in particular, cimetidine, which is a reflux medication, can inhibit the DAO enzyme. So many roads can lead to histamine intolerance. And so let's look at what those symptoms are. I think we started the presentation kind of identifying the headaches or the migraines, but nausea, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea, gas, constipation. I do have an FAQ to how to figure out, you know, is it histamine? Body-wide, headache, dizziness, brain fog, itchy skin, rash or hives, nasal congestion and sneezing. Now, I would like to just comment that we're not, the histamine from the diet or histamine intolerance, although some of your classic histamine-related symptoms are involved, it's more GI issues, but some people may have system-wide. I didn't mention this, but the DAO enzyme primarily present in the small intestines. There is another enzyme that manages histamine from your typical allergic response. If you have allergies and your mast cells in your bloodstream, if that's producing histamine, there's a different enzyme that manages and breaks down that histamine. So we're specifically focusing in on gut on the histamine in the digestive tract. So what do you do? Those were the symptoms. Of course, maybe limit histamine foods, but my goodness, I'm a doctor of clinical nutrition, and how can I tell you to limit fermented foods? Now, there's some of these, like your aged meats. I think that those are foods. The charcuterie boards with the aged cheeses and the pepperoni and all the different aged meats, the salami, the bologna, you could probably scale back on those, but sauerkraut is such a good food. Kimchi, we love kimchi. We love pickles, but other aged foods like wine and beer, particularly red wine, but citrus, oranges, canned fish, shellfish, those are ones that are problematic for some people. And food that's just not fresh, leftovers. Because what's happening is the bacteria in those foods start to produce histamine. So in your leftovers, histamine will begin to be produced by bacteria in food, even if it's cooked food. We know that there's still some bacteria that's hanging around that the cooking process was not able to completely destroy, and they will start making histamine. Also, I've read, like, if you go fishing or if you go hunting, you certainly want to clean the fish, degut the fish, clean it as fast as possible, because histamine will start being made inside of those foods as well. Now, when you look at other foods, all of these may not necessarily contain histamine. For example, strawberries, papaya, they can bind directly to those cells that make histamine and trigger histamine release. So I'm saying all this to say, I put this as a solution, but it's really not a realistic solution. It's good to have this histamine list and see if there are strategies or foods on this list where you have opportunities to scale it back. But a more realistic option is also to add in the DAO enzyme, similar to someone who's lactose intolerant, and there's now milk that has the lactate enzyme added. You take your digestive enzymes. There are enzymes to help us digest fats, to help us digest a lot of plant-based foods. So this is another enzyme that can help us to digest that histamine, especially when the DAO enzyme that we make in our body is being overwhelmed. Then we can take or ingest the DAO enzyme to just help ease the burden of histamine on the body. And so there are clinical studies demonstrating a porcine-derived DAO enzyme alleviates symptoms associated with dietary histamine, migraine episodes, skin symptoms as well. And you can see studies used between 10,000 and 20,000 HDU. Those are histamine degrading units. That's a way to measure kind of that histamine degrading activity, or the activity of that enzyme. But many people prefer to avoid animal-based enzymes. And so Life Extension is exploring a plant-based option. And this is a plant-based DAO enzyme from pea sprouts. So we're very excited about this. At the same histamine degrading unit activity as what we're seeing in the clinical study to alleviate discomfort associated with dietary histamine, great for vegans, vegetarians, or anyone who avoids consuming pork product. Most of your commercially available DAO enzyme is derived from pigs. And so this plant pea sprout option is good, that it can be consumed regularly before consuming foods or beverages that may contain or elicit the release of histamine, kind of like strawberries. And so this can be consumed before the heaviest meals up to 3 times per day. Now let's get to some FAQs. And I mentioned this is just one that I wanted to review before we move on to our next topic. How do I know it's histamine intolerance, especially when you look at the wider range of foods from citrus to berries, and some of it relates to you just kind of doing trial and error. The histamine intolerance usually occurs close to the time that you have eaten that food. But we know that true allergies, life-threatening, immediate allergic reactions, these are within minutes. Intolerances or sensitivities, such as what we're talking about today, typically occur some hours after ingestion. And I'm lactose intolerant, so my symptoms, if I don't have my enzymes, if I overwhelm my enzyme, which I do sometimes, the symptoms usually occur a couple hours, 2 to 3 hours after ingestion. That's just my personal experience with lactose and needing that lactase enzyme to help. It's celiac disease. This is an autoimmune condition, so this is not related. But this kind of gives you a little bit of a guide. Is it histamine intolerance or another cause? If you have chronic GI issues, you know, it doesn't hurt to try an elimination diet or try a round of digestive enzymes. If you're finding that your typical digestive enzymes aren't helping with your symptoms, then DAO is another enzyme for you to try to see if it helps. But you may want to speak to a physician if you suspect that, if your symptoms persist or you suspect that maybe it's something else. Okay, so moving on to our last topic, which is plant-based female hormone support. So this is just going into peri and menopause, widely experienced, undertreated. The shift on this topic, the tides are changing. We are seeing more conversations and discussions related to menopause. We do know that 1.2 billion estimated people by the year 2030. And about 10% are receiving treatment. So the time preceding menopause, when the production of hormones start to decline and the fertility diminishes, is known as perimenopause. These symptoms can begin as early as the mid-30s and can last for a few months or for several years. So you can see that on the chart. Menopause is defined as beginning when a minimum of 12 months without menstruation have passed. The average onset is early 50s, and this is when the ovaries have stopped producing estrogen and progesterone. And the reason I'm showing you these numbers is because the nutrient, or kind of these age ranges, is one, it's important for you to know that this starts early. So we're talking to you. Maybe you're trying to help your grandchildren. Maybe you're trying to help your loved one, your partner, who may be dealing with some unsuspecting symptoms and not quite sure where they're coming from. And we'll look at kind of that full list of symptoms, but sleep problems, brain fog, the list of symptoms span beyond hot flashes. That gets a lot of the attention, but it's important to also know that there are many menopausal symptoms. And so this all relates to a decline in estrogen. And we did see that, I didn't point it out here, but what we are seeing on this chart, this is looking at, or I better get my pointer. This is looking at the estrogen levels and how those levels decline. And it's important for you to see, the decline in estrogen as well as progesterone are some of the causes. And this decline, while many people view it, and it is a natural stage of life, there's nothing wrong, but we also know that estrogen is there for a reason. So it's not you're doing yourself somewhat of an injustice to avoid addressing the decline in estrogen. Estrogen, of course, is needed for structural maintenance, but gut health, urinary tract health, brain support, bone health. This is a widely recognized aspect of estrogen, and one that most physicians will try to manage in the menopausal years and beyond, but also supporting lipid metabolism as well as fluid balance in the body. And then, of course, the symptoms that many women may not want to talk about, such as vaginal dryness, urinary issues, sexual dysfunction, but also sleep disturbances, irritability, joint discomfort. Let's put a pin on joint discomfort, because when we look at the nutrient with fenugreek is what we'll be talking about. There is some research with joint discomfort, exhaustion. Each woman experiences menopause in a unique way, and so it's beyond hot flashes. And just to give you some stats here, we still have time. Sleep disturbances are the fourth most frequent menopausal complaint, with up to 40 to 60% of perimenopausal and postmenopausal women reporting sleep trouble. And let's just let that sink in. 40 to 60%. Sleep is a pillar of health. And so even if you decide to support your hormones just to get a good night's sleep, it can make a world of difference in your overall health, in your brain health, and your energy levels. More than 40% of peri and postmenopausal women experience physical and mental exhaustion and cite forgetfulness as a menopausal symptom. So we oftentimes look at these herbs that can help with mental fatigue and exhaustion, and to help to support memory. Many of you are probably thinking about magnesium and ashwagandha and sage, and these nutrients that we know can help to support mental health, but also dealing with root cause. If it's related to a decline in estrogen, then maybe that's a better place to start. And also keeping in mind that perimenopause starts in your mid-30s. And so there are different levels of hormone intervention, and I wanted to add this slide here just so you can see the big picture and where we are when you look at the big picture. Now there's dietary lifestyle. This is looking at the foods that we're eating, plant-based, whole food plant-based diets. And I'm just going to use my pointer here again, whole food plant-based diets up here. This is where your yoga, your Pilates, your exercise absolutely can help to manage menopausal symptoms. And we're here at level 2 herbal therapies. We'll come back there. There are also over-the-counter hormones. You can purchase, there's DHEA, there is pregnenolone that you can purchase over the counter. There are estrogen creams, progesterone creams available over the counter. And then of course there are prescription hormone options. And so right now we're just looking at the herbal therapies, some of these add-ins that can help to manage some of those symptoms. And now we see that can help to support estrogen directly. And this, what we'll focus on specifically is the herb fenugreek. Fenugreek has been long used in Ayurvedic, Persian traditional medicine to relieve menstrual cramps, enhance libido, as well as to manage menopausal symptoms. In India, fenugreek is consumed throughout a woman's life cycle, all the way from adolescence to postmenopause. The tea is used during puberty to ease menstrual cramps following childbirth. It's also used to promote lactation. I used it to promote lactation and uterine recovery as a tea. And then now we're looking at the perimenopause and menopausal years. And research is showing that it's also supporting hormonal balance and reducing the risk of conditions associated with low estrogen. Let's just go back here really quick. And the 2 bioactive compounds that Life Extension is excited about. So we're not really focusing in on the fenugreek seeds, although you can have those for fresh breath after a meal, or fenugreek tea used traditionally. When you start looking at the active constituents in fenugreek, there are 2 active constituents where the research is taking off. And one is protodiosine and trigonelline. Trigonelline. I always have trouble with that word. And so let's look at the first active constituent, which is protodiosine. This is an active component that can support or promote the production of estrogen as well as other sex hormones. It's converted in the body to DHEA, and this is the active constituent. It's converted to DHEA. And you can see here DHEA is a precursor and can convert to testosterone and then convert to estrogen. So what is nice about this herbal option, it can directly increase estrogen levels, meaning you can have a lab test, measure your estrogen, you can take this extract, and maybe 3 months later, measure your estrogen as well, and you should see an improvement in estrogen levels. At least that's what the researchers saw in the study that we will look at, both studies that we'll look at. And then we also know that fenugreek also acts as a phytoestrogen. So as a phytoestrogen, and what you're seeing on the image, phytoestrogens are not delivering or are not increasing your estrogen levels. So with phytoestrogens, you can't take a lab test, take the phytoestrogen and then retest. You will not see an increase in your estrogen levels. But what the phytoestrogens do, they are similar in structure to estradiol, one of the body's primary estrogens, and it can kind of trick the cells or bind to those same estrogen receptors in your cell, mimicking the effect of estrogen. So with increasing estrogen directly is one thing. When you mimic the effect of estrogen, what you're saying is these nutrients, or what we're saying is these nutrients help to offset the symptoms associated with the decline in estrogen. And so what we're seeing is fenugreek is working in both ways. And here's a study, one study in particular that was conducted in perimenopausal women, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, 42 women, 500 milligrams of fenugreek seed extract standardized to both of those active constituents. And what the researchers saw, improvements from baseline in estradiol, progesterone, testosterone total and free, as well as improvements in symptoms such as insomnia, depression, night sweats, and hot flashes. And then we have another study, and this study was, the average age was 45 to 58. So the women were a little older, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, 41 women, same extract, standardized to the two constituents, 42 days, and there was a 46.2% decrease in menopausal symptom scores based on a menopause symptom questionnaire. Reductions in psychological symptoms such as mood swings and depression, hot flashes and night sweats. And remember, I told you to put a pin into joint issues. There were improvements in physical symptoms such as joint pain and even sleep disturbances. The researchers also saw an increase in estradiol level, that active estrogen, and an increase in progesterone. And overall, 76% of the fenugreek extract group reported a substantial improvement within just 2 weeks of supplementation. Now, there are other supportive nutrients that you can also consider: red clover, black cohosh. We're not going to spend time going into these, but just wanted to highlight chaste tree berry, other supportive nutrients that you may want to consider as well to help to manage your menopausal symptoms. And with that, that concludes the content part. This is just a summary slide. Again, we talked about garlic for heart health, specifically aged black garlic, DAO or DAO enzyme for histamine-related symptoms, and standardized fenugreek for menopausal relief. We do have a couple of slides of references that you can review as needed. And we always welcome you to learn more with Life Extension. We have our Learn site on the website. You can find health quizzes, wellness blogs, magazine articles, protocols, health news, and so much more. We also invite you to subscribe to our social media channels, particularly YouTube. Please subscribe. We have lots of educational videos, fun educational shorts on our YouTube channel, as well as the Live Forever-ish podcast and Ellie Live. Both are on our YouTube channel. So check out our podcasts on your major podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all of the above, iHeart. And please subscribe to our show. It's with me and Dr. Mike, our Director of Education and Spokesperson. And you can learn more by scanning the QR code that you see on your screen.